Good morning. My name is Flint Anderson, and welcome to Old Man Energy. I'm your host. Said that a little backwards today. That's all right, though, because we're going to have some fun. I want to talk about perspective versus perception today. We had some pretty heavy topics last week and got some more coming up over the next couple of weeks, maybe even going to release them early, but did not want to put this one off anymore because I think this is a critical topic for a lot of people, especially now that those of us that are entrepreneurs and sales reps, we're rolling into the fourth quarter. We're trying to wrap up our goals for this year, set our goals for next year, all of that. Hopefully you're still taking your goals from this year seriously. If you're just so far gone that you don't feel like you can get there anymore, well, then now's the time to reset and start working on your goals for next year. Can't emphasize that enough. But let's talk about perspective versus perception, because this is going to help every single one of you in your daily interactions with people, sales, whatever it is. A perspective, the actual definition for this podcast and for most of reality, is how you experience the world. Perception is how you think other people experience the world. Understanding the difference between the two is absolutely critical. But understanding how to experience the world through somebody else's eyes, at least how you believe somebody else experiences the world, is insanely powerful. If you can match both of these, you'll be unstoppable. It gives you an empathy that most people can't even understand. You will be able to see things from others' perspective. And one thing you'll find out is you'll develop a lot of patience for people. You step back and you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, even if you're not completely accurate with the way you think they see the world, you develop some patience with people. One of my statements here lately has been, it takes exactly the same amount of emotional energy or energy in general to believe the negative as it does to believe the positive. This has helped me in many, many situations when people are rude, when people cut you off in traffic, whatever. Just if you truly believe that the positive aspect, or maybe there's something bigger going on in their life, you don't even have to try. You automatically develop more patience with them. Makes it much, much easier. So I want to talk about different ways that we experience perspective and perception, and both of these physical and emotional, just so that you can understand and get a well-rounded idea of how this impacts your thinking every day. And trust me, it does, even if you don't think it does. And then some practical applications on how you can use this in your life moving forward. So it's a lot. I want to dig into it. I want to jump down. Be sure you're liking and subscribing and following me. I cut these up into shorts for those of you that don't like long format and post them. I also post different content on all platforms almost daily, if not daily, and sometimes multiple times a day, just depending on what I'm doing. Make sure that you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I usually say that at the end. I want to say it at the beginning because I appreciate you guys. Watch my subscriber count going up slowly. Do not have a huge following on YouTube right now, but across all the platforms, there's a lot of you out there paying attention. And those of you that are giving me feedback, I really appreciate. Perspective and perception in the same sentence. Perspective is, I appreciate it, and I could get frustrated and see that I don't have a lot of followers on YouTube, and I'd like you guys to fix that, share it, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Perception being is I get a lot of feedback from people in my everyday life and online and my messages, and I know that you guys are out there watching and seeing. So I could get upset about the people that aren't experiencing it, or I could focus and go all in on the people that are. That's a good example of perspective versus perception. Another thing, when you're running a live event, you have these grandeur ideas. At least I do. I think everything's a big deal, and I want hundreds of people to show up, and then I invite 50, and when 100 don't show up, I get confused. You've done that before. Don't say you haven't. We've all done it. Well, typically when you invite 50, maybe 6 show up or 6 commit. What does that mean? Well, you could spend time crying and wailing and whining about this didn't happen or that didn't happen and talking about the people that didn't show up. Well, guess what you're doing? You are discounting the people that did show up. I had this happen last year, maybe 2 years ago, at one of my events in Orlando. I invited a ton of people. I think we sent out 300 or 400 invitations to networking event. 5 people showed up. So what do? Well, I knew these 5 people. There wasn't a lot of additional networking that could be done because we already worked together closely. So we had a roundtable discussion and rather didn't even mention how many invitations went out, how many people weren't there, whatever, they missed it. Poured into those 5 people. We had a roundtable discussion. We addressed issues that they had. We gave as much value as possible and turned into an incredibly amazing event. You can still see pictures of that popping up and some quotes and stuff there. The people that were there took a lot away from that. I've watched each and every one of them go on to have additional successes, maybe not because of that, but I'd like to think that it helped because there was a ton of knowledge sitting at that table. And if I had focused from my perspective at the failure, quote unquote failure of the event, well, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. But it wasn't a failure. It turned out to be a great event and actually has structured the way I run events moving forward now because of the value that I got, the perception that I got of how that worked going forward. When I talk about my glasses, great example of perspective versus perception. As a lot of you have seen, they've been popping up in my videos more and more recently. I'm supposed to wear them all the time. I did not want to admit that I needed glasses. Apparently, I've needed them for a long time. I've needed them for reading for a while, but as we get older, our eyesight kind of suffers a little bit. Yeah, well, anyway, that being said, went to the eye doctor a few months ago, got new glasses, and they hurt. It just made me feel weird. The one thing that I noticed when I got them was I could see three-dimensionally. I never realized that I didn't have any depth perception. Turns out I had a bit of a lazy eye, and it was impacting my depth perception. We don't know what's not there if you can't see it. So I'm looking around, and it's like I just put on the world's best 3D glasses. I'm like, what the hell? Not running into stuff as much, not running over curbs as much when I'm driving, all the things because my perspective changed. Therefore, I was perceiving things differently. Now, still stubborn. I still didn't wear them all the time. Carried readers around with me so that I could see the small print on the menus, medicine bottles, things like that. Turns out I don't need those either when I wear them because these are progressive and they have a bifocal in the bottom, which allows me to read. So started wearing them more frequently all the time at this point so that I could change my perspective because I need the perception of the world to be as accurate as possible. So just little things like that. That's a very physical manifestation of that. Now, can you reproduce this? I don't know. You don't want to go out and ruin your eyesight like I have. I don't know if I ruined my eyesight, but it's getting degraded. So here's an experiment you can just kind of fun. You can do this for yourself. And if you have kids, this is great. If you do this with your kids, I want you to record it and please upload it and tag me because it's hilarious. So take 3 buckets. I want you to put hot water in one of them. I want you to put cold water, like ice water, in another one. And I want you to put room temperature water in the middle one. So you're going to set those 3 up. Now, do this yourself first so you understand just the confusion. And if you record yourself, bonus on you there because this is funny. Your face is going to make some, even though you know what to expect, your face is going to create some interesting video. So you simultaneously, you're going to put your hands in the hot and the cold water, and you're going to leave it there for, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds, whatever. Don't make it too uncomfortable, but long enough so that you start getting used to how it feels. And then you're going to shove both hands at the same time in the room temperature water. And the cognitive dissonance that's going to happen whenever you do this, because of how you perceive that room temperature water, intellectually, you know, because you created it, that water is room temperature. But simultaneously, your hands are telling you that that bucket of water is hot and cold, even though you know that both can't possibly be true. It makes for some interesting times. But once you've done that, once you've had your fun with it and you enjoy that, and I may do this with one or several of my grandkiddos because I think it'll be a fun test. Think about what that means. It means that you have the perception of knowing what's in those buckets. You did it. You created the hot water. You created the cold water. You put the room temperature water. You know what's in there. So your perspective is accurate. But your perception after you've put your hands in the water, in the cold and the hot, and then put them in the middle is completely off. It's wrong. And is it wrong or is it just interpretation? Because you see, your brain doesn't understand the physical world around it. Everything is just chemicals and electrical signals to your brain. Your brain, your eyes are your nervous system's vision of the world, or that's how you experience the world. So take this, and the lesson that you want to take away from this is that it's very possible that everything you're experiencing is wrong. Or at least if it's not wrong, it could be being experienced, the same exact circumstances could be being experienced differently by someone else because of their history, because of their perspective. Their perception is different. Your perception of the exact same circumstances is different because of your perspective. And this is a very important lesson. I want you don't take away anything else from this podcast. I want you to take away this, is that we can only experience things from our perspective. our collective histories, experiences, pains, losses, frustrations over the years have led to this moment in our lives and how we perceive everything around us, how we interact with each other, and what have you. If you can step outside of yourself for a minute, and you'll never not be able to be awakened to this now that it's been pointed out to you. But if you can take a moment and step away from yourself, and the next time you're talking with somebody, and this can be somebody close to you, this can be somebody stranger that you somebody at a networking event, it doesn't matter. Do your level best to try and put yourself into their shoes. And that's the metaphor that everybody uses for altering your perspective. This is especially fun to do with children. If you have children that you interact with on a regular basis, you can see the world from a very cool perspective if you try and put yourself into the shoes of a child. Because children do this, and our one of our granddaughters does this all the time, is they try and figure things out. They're naturally curious, and the smarter they are, the more they try and assign meaning and value to different experiences. They come up with solutions or explanations for things that are quite often incorrect, but also very creative and not exactly wrong. Putting yourself into the shoes of a child, trying to understand the world, is a very refreshing thing, but it's very enlightening too. And you know what? You might relate to your kiddo more because you can start to see the world with how they see it, and they will pick up on that. And then they're trying to figure it out by themselves. They don't feel so alone. This works for adults too, because whenever you start putting yourself into someone else's shoes, trying to see the world from their perspective, subtly they pick up on that, and that creates an instant bond with them. It makes them realize that they're not completely alone, or that you are familiar enough that you can understand why they're thinking the way that they're thinking. And you don't have to do this perfectly every time. Chris Voss does this in a lot of his podcasts. He names what people are feeling or what he believes that they're feeling, and he tries to read their body cues and chemistry. And if it's wrong, they tell him. If it's right, they instantly relate to him. If he's wrong, then he'll readjust based on what they told him, and then he'll relate to them on a different level. It's a way to build rapport very quickly with people, but it's also a way to connect with a lot of people and to leave people feeling better when you walk away from them than they did when you showed up. So I want you to take a minute and think about that. Disconnect from your own reality long enough to try and experience the world from someone else's. It can't be stated how powerful that is. Perspective versus perception. It's interpretation. And it's hard sometimes for us to swallow the fact that the way we see the world is not necessarily the way everybody else sees the world. We see this in couples a lot, especially long-term couples. I'd say greater than 10 years usually have this figured out. And Des and I are blessed. We're running on 26 years together, and we figured this out a long time ago because we talked about this. We didn't know this is what we were talking about at the time, but we were talking about meeting each other's needs where we need them met. And I talk about this with other couples too. If we come into a relationship, this works with a friendship too, but I'm talking about couples for right now. If you come into a relationship and you have a list of needs and things that make you feel loved and valued as a person, and the other person in this relationship, because newsflash, relationships take two people, they have a list of things that they need to feel loved and valued as a person. Sometimes you have a physical list, but usually it's just a feeling. And usually, unless you put put some thought into it, you don't have that written down. But what we do is we look at that list, even subconsciously, and go, well, since this is important to me, it must be important to my partner. So we start doing those things that make us feel loved and valued, perspective, and then get confused when it's not received in the same way that we would receive it, perception. So the secret is, my voice cracked a little bit there. I don't know why. The secret is you want to uncover that list in your partner and share your list with your partner. And then once you have that list, then you start going down it and you start meeting their needs where they're met. And the classic example for this is women approach relationships emotionally, men approach relationships physically. She needs to meet his needs physically, he needs to meet her needs emotionally, and they'll be happy ever after. It's more deep than that, but that puts it in perspective so that you can use this particular tool and apply it moving forward. It's not magic. It feels like it. But if you take the time to get to know your partner, your spouse, whoever you're with, and understand what their needs are and where they need to be met, you will have no problem building that relationship and forming a strong bond going forward. And you'll get to where you can do this very, very quickly with other people at networking events and what have you, because you don't have to establish a great deep long-term bond and understand everything about them, you can just start reacting in what they've shared with you on a very superficial level so that they understand that you're attempting to meet their perspective. And as humans, we really respond to that very, very well. So continuing to operate from our own understanding of the world, from our own perception, is holding us back. Because if we can't see the world from somebody else's perspective, then we're out there trying to solve every problem with a hammer, if that's our perception. Whereas we may need a saw, we may need a screwdriver, we may need a drill to solve these other problems. So practice. It's easy to practice. You just have to pay attention to your conversations, pay attention to your action, pay attention to other people's interaction with each other. Watch their body language. You don't have to go study a lot of things. You can tell certain things about body language. If somebody doesn't want to be talking to you, they're going to be turned away from you, all of that. I mean, that is not what this one's about. But you can use all of those subtle clues to help you understand how somebody's thinking and how somebody wants to interact with you or doesn't want to interact. And I could give you 1,000 different anecdotes on how this works and how this doesn't work. But if you don't operate from somebody else's perspective in a sales situation, you're costing yourself money. If you do operate from somebody else's perspective, you can anticipate what their objections are going to be and you can call them out. One of the easiest ways to do this is to state how their interaction towards you says they're feeling. And then if you've anticipated based on that what their objections are going to be, state those objections out loud. Well, I bet you think that this costs too much money, or I think that you don't want to be talking about this. This is probably the last thing on your list today. A lot of sales reps avoid these uncomfortable conversations thinking, oh, I'm going to turn this prospect off, or I'm going to lose the deal if I call out what's really going on, or if I acknowledge the fact that they don't want to be closing today, that I'm not going to get the deal. You're probably not going to get the deal anyway. And acknowledging what's existing in reality is not going to impact you one way or the other than to put it on the table and make it not have as much meaning. It's like acknowledging the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it, but as soon as you start talking about it, all of a sudden it goes away. It's not as big of a deal. If something makes you feel, and I want to spend a lot more time on the entrepreneur side of things, but not here because that's going to not apply to everybody. So if you are in sales and you want more on this, then reach out to me. Let's have a discussion one-on-one, see if there's something there that I can help you with as far as that goes. The other thing is, if you are impacted in a situation in a negative way, if something's making you feel uncomfortable, is making you upset, is reacting in what you would perceive as a negative way, if you're reacting in what you would perceive it as a negative way, it's really hypercritical that you step outside of yourself for a second and try and interpret, is this person doing this on purpose? Or is there something else going on inside of me that's making me feel this way? And unfortunately, sometimes there's some people out there that just want to watch the world burn and they're just being mean on purpose. But this gives you your power back in that type of situation, because if they're really trying to make you uncomfortable at just being a jerk, making fun of you, saying rude things, whenever you put it, you step out of your own perception, you start to look at it from their perspective, it removes the emotions from it. And you can look at them and you can say clever things like, well, did you mean for that to be hurtful? Or did you mean to are you trying to make me feel this? Are you trying to embarrass me? And then be quiet and let them answer. You'll find that if somebody's being rude on purpose, this puts them on the spot because they're not used to being called out about that. Now, all of a sudden, you have your control back and you don't have to allow other people to have that level of control over you and over your feelings. You should never allow that anyway. But without the ability to step outside of your own perception and go into their perspective, you have no idea how to deal with that. You know it's happening, but you're reacting completely emotionally. And we're human. We do react emotionally to things. But as you find your heightened emotional state, and this can be true for both directions, for what you perceive as a negative emotion or what you perceive as a positive emotion, because some people will use excitement and joy to manipulate you just as much. This allows you to maintain your control. So if you feel your emotions getting heightened either way, step out, look at it from their perspective. And you know what? It's not always bad. Sometimes their excitement and their love of a particular event or a thing will be infecting you and making you excited with them. If that's the case, go with it, enjoy it, ride that high, be on that journey together and enjoy yourself. But if they're attempting to manipulate you, you can step back and say, hey, wait a minute. I'm excited about this, but are you saying this just because of X? Again, call it for what it is. Put them on the spot. That's okay. They're doing the same thing to you. So my challenge to you is in your interactions with people, especially your business interactions, your networking interactions, is to start calling the emotions what they are. Step outside, attempt to interpret their perspective. And then once you think you've got it, state what you believe their perspective to be. Worst case scenario, you're wrong. They're going to tell you what their perspective is, and you'll be able to adjust and interpret those signals differently next time. Best case scenario, they're going to tell you, man, you're a genius. That is exactly what I was meaning. It's exactly how I'm feeling. How did you know that? Either way, you win because you get the feedback and you get that. So you can use this to relate people on. I talked about romantic. I'm talking about coaching or mentoring people. I'm talking about with your kids. Sometimes therapists use this as well. And you can also use this to some perspective in leading your team. If you have a sales team, if you have a team that's not necessarily motivated, all of those different scenarios, you can use this to relate to people on your team or to relate to your team as a whole. Because if you want to be perceived as something, then you can, when interacting with them, when in a group meeting, you can tell them, this is what I'm attempting to convey. This is how I need you to see this. This is the way I need you to understand this. So you can use it that way too. And it's not always a pull, it can be a push. So whenever you're pushing information out there, whenever you're pushing information to your team or your family or what have you, you can tell them how you want it to be interpreted and how you want it to be perceived. And a lot of times they'll be relieved because now they're not guessing, they're let off the hook. And if they choose to interpret it a different way, well, then you turn around and say, look, I told you this is the way I meant that. If you took it some other way, that was not my intention. It's not what I meant at all. So perception is our reality. How we perceive things is how we see the world, but it's not always actually what's going on. It's our interpretation of events based on every decision we've made up until this point. And all of us are different. So one of the quotes that I love is the greatest detriment to communication is the illusion that it happened. If you use that to clarify your communication with other people, to interpret how other people are taking your statements and your teaching and your perspective, and they're perceiving it in a certain way, it's going to help you establish communication. You're going to be more clear. We've all had that one friend that we think at the end of a conversation, we think things are going one way, they think they're going another. And come to find out when we finally do talk about it, because now we're frustrated because nobody did what they were supposed to do, quote unquote. Well, there's two different ways that that could be interpreted. I had this happen yesterday with an email. One of my companies dealt with a property manager. I had 4 items on a task list. 2 of them were unclear as to on their end what they wanted done. They weren't sure. The person on site was not in touch with management. Their communication was not occurring. 2 of them were beyond our ability. So I sent an email back. I said, I don't remember the exact wording of the email, but it said, need clarification on the first 2. And the second 2, I can't do, but here's referrals to people that can. Pretty clear cut. Well, the property manager took that as I can't do anything. I can't help at all. Turned it back into upper management. I happen to have a relationship with upper management. They reached back out to me and said, what do you mean? This property manager said that you couldn't do these things. I said, well, with 2 of them, I couldn't. I told him who to call and referred him over there. I said, but the first 2, there was no clear perspective. The person on site didn't know what was going on. So there's a 1-line sentence in there that says that. Well, if you go back and read the email again, that line in that email could be interpreted as I don't want to do the work at all because I can't handle any of it, or I need clarification on these pieces, but here's the pieces that I can help with, but not myself. I can refer you to people. So my communication, while clear to me, was unclear on the receiver's end and was still unclear even as it went up the chain for management. Luckily, I had that relationship with one of the senior managers. He was able to reach out and we were able to clarify it. But how many times has this happened to you in a personal situation where you thought something was incredibly clear and it ended up costing you a deal or costing you a friendship or what have you? I can't remember the title of it right now, but there's a very poignant Black Mirror episode talking about this, which is the whole episode is about a misinterpretation of events and it ends up affecting someone's life long term and not in a good way, which is sad. So make sure that whenever you think you've perceived something correctly, that you ask about it and you state it out loud. And if there's not a follow up in a written communication that you think there should be, make that follow up, make that statement out loud, find out what's going on. The quote from Henry Ford is perfectly aligned with all of this. Is whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Now, we always apply that to goals and dreams and what have you, but it also applies to perception. If you think you understand something, you're right. And if you think something's a certain way, well, you're right. But you know what? They think it's a different way in the exact same circumstances. They're also right because they only can interpret things from their perspective. So you can talk about this with excuses. You can talk about this with different things. And I'm going to wrap this up right now with stating the quote, in sales, perception is everything. What you feel matters more than what you say. And this is true in sales. I don't know who made that quote, and I did some searching and I couldn't find it. So, but what you do and what you say in a sales situation doesn't matter as long as the person is feeling what your intention is for them to feel. Same thing in personal relationships, same thing in mentor coaching relationships. The way that person is feeling, it doesn't matter what you're saying, it doesn't matter what you believe. It matters what they understand and what they're feeling and what they believe. Because at the end of the day, if you're attempting to act on someone else in a positive or a negative manner, the only thing that they can act on it is the way that you made them feel, the way that you made them, the way they understand what message you're trying to convey. So this is not always a point of being clear because you can be absolutely clear from your own perspective and if they perceive it differently. So the way to do that is to state what you should be feeling, or not what you want them to feel, what you want them to understand, and then ask them to repeat back to you how they're feeling and what their understanding is. You'll find out that long term, your communication has probably not been as effective as possible. So if you haven't already, like, subscribe, follow me. Next week, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things. I think I'm going to have an interim video here where I'm talking about household budgeting and what have you. Also, some different basic skills for running a household. This is going to be for my younger audience, I believe, although I've had some feedback from some of my older members wanting to deal with this as well. I'm going to be running a one-on-one seminar with that, which there'll be some recordings available if you've missed it, depending on when you're watching this episode, specifically on how to run a household budget and why it's important that you know that. I'm going to be talking about men's mental health and specifically about our age, meaning my age, which is an older Gen X, mental health, but how our mental health impacts those young men that are following us and helping to teach them to guard their mental health as well. So we got some pretty heavy topics coming up all over the place a little bit, but you know what? All of this is relevant. Make sure that you follow along because you're not going to want to miss any of this. Thank you guys for your attention. That's what drives this engine. Check out the links in my comments below and in the description. You're going to find some OME merch. We got that new store launched and some of my other programs if you're interested in solving some problems you got following yourself around out there. Love y'all.